We could trade with everyone. I want to trade with all countries, including Russia or Iran or Venezuela or Cuba. There's plenty of reasons to trade with all these countries and to have open relations with them. And to the extent possible, influence their people to be more as free as they possibly can be, not in the CIA color revolution kind of way, just in the, if you're having a conversation with a guy in Cuba, like tell him about why capitalism is a better system than socialism. But, don't tell him that he in support and start sending arms to the revolutionaries in his country or something like that. Try some kind of coup or something crazy. But yeah, I'm definitely for, doing what we can to starve the beast and to bring the US empire back and turn the America back into a republic like it was meant to be.
100%. I mean, I've had some of the best times in my life in the United States. Some of my best friends, clients are Americans. I never blame an American, but I do not like what the federal government is doing on any level. So if you guys ever hear me or think that you are hearing me bash Americans, you've got it incorrect. I'm not bashing Americans. I'm bashing the federal government, which I think is vile.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. Anything we could do to bring the U.S. empire down to size is a great thing.
So let's get into what is happening in the world. And this is kind of an interesting thing for me because I have actually my wife and I have just had our third child. So I've been kind of out of the day-to-day geopolitics for a little bit of time right now, where normally I follow these things intensely. But at the moment, family first, we've got a brand new baby, he sleeps with us. So that's kind of waking me up a little bit in the night. So we're trying to catch up on some sleep here and there. But I'm genuinely interested what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot going on in the world right now. Would you like to start in Europe with Ukraine, Middle East?
Let's go for Middle East because that's kind of where we just left off of your journey towards these types of things. But I do want to understand what is happening in Ukraine at the moment, as well as anything that we can discuss for China. My wife is from mainland China, so I'm always very concerned about the escalation with the Taiwan Strait.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I guess starting in the Middle East, there's certainly a lot going on, and all of it really revolves around Israel and its military operations in Gaza. And so at this point in time, Israel has really worked its way from north to south in the Gaza Strip. And if anybody wants to look at a map, you can see it's like a rectangular piece of land that is situated in southern Israel along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. There is a border between Egypt and Gaza. So it's not all that, Israel controls every single border crossing. However, as of today, they have invaded the southern city of Rafah and have taken control of that last border crossing with Egypt. Now, before that, Egypt was allowing Israel to inspect, and anything that went through that Rafah crossing would have to cross through southern Israel in their inspections first, then would travel into Egypt and then finally into Gaza. But now Israel has just seized that Rafah border crossing. So Israel has worked north to south in Gaza and has really decimated every city along the way. There's one city left in Gaza that hasn't been completely leveled. That is Rafah. And Israel started their operations. I guess it would technically be last night. Last week, they basically gave Hamas a 1-week notice. They said, release our hostages, accept a hostage deal to release our hostages, or else we will invade. Over the weekend, Hamas did agree to that, but Israel said they didn't agree to Hamas's version of the truce, and so it didn't apply. And then they dropped leaflets on the city and immediately started bombing. There's about 1.4 to 1.7 million people crammed into Rafah right now. It's kind of unclear on the numbers just because, Gaza is an enclave of 2.3 million people, and about 90 to 95% of the people are displaced. And so it's really hard to identify where everybody is living. Cindy McCain, the widow of John McCain, who now heads the UN World Food Program. So this is not a peacenik. This is not somebody in our camp. This is somebody well entrenched in the establishment, as well as Samantha Power, who heads up USAID, have both said that there's a famine happening in the northern half of the Gaza Strip. Now, by the international definition of famine, that means 2 per 10,000 people are dying every day of deprivation. I don't know exactly what metric the US is using, and I would guess there's like 300,000 to 500,000 people in northern Gaza. So we are talking about dozens, scores of people dying every day in northern Gaza from the famine. And then in the southern half, again in Rafah, you have the military campaign going on. So let me know where I could maybe elaborate more.
No, I mean, it's just these types of numbers are so staggering that it just makes me sick to my stomach. So, are any peace talks happening? Is there anything diplomatic going on at the moment with this?
Not at the moment. Over the weekend, the US was really pressing to get a last minute hostage deal done. The deal that was on the table was 33 of, I believe, the last civilian hostages that are held by either Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the two main armed groups in Gaza. So there's about 130 hostages left. I believe about 33 of them are civilians. The rest are military. So, one thing that kind of gets left out of the whole October 7th narrative is about half of the people that Hamas killed on that day were soldiers. About half, I think a little less than half of the people who were captured were soldiers. Now, Israel will kind of play it up and say that, oh, these are women. And yeah, they are women, but they're also soldiers. And so it's I think a little bit different than just capturing all civilians and having all civilians. So Hamas was really willing to release those 33 in exchange for a 40-day ceasefire. And the 40-day ceasefire was meant to be a period to continue diplomacy to eventually reach a permanent ceasefire. But the Israelis said that that was not an option, that they had to go in. They have to invade and destroy Rafah, even if it means, I guess, killing the hostages. Top priority is going in and destroying Rafah. Now, the significance of this is, of course, is that this is the last area in Gaza with any real infrastructure. So, the aid agencies, they have to establish safe houses. They have to coordinate with the Israeli government, like, hey, this is, a place where our people are. These are not in any way militants. Like, you cannot bomb this location. All these things take time, not to mention just toilets, right? Like, if you don't have toilets, think, I don't know if you've been to any libertarian or any festivals where there's maybe a few thousand or 10,000 people and the porta potties start overflowing. Like, things get nasty pretty quick. Now imagine you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people and there's no toilets whatsoever. Like, and then of course this gets more serious than just being like nasty and smelly. Like, diseases start spreading. So we've had reports of serious ones such as diphtheria and hepatitis A spreading among children, but just overall hundreds of thousands of cases of like diarrheal and upper respiratory infections, largely just because of the lack of facilities. Of course, almost all the hospitals have been destroyed. So we're talking about removing the last of the operating theaters in Gaza and just warehouses and things like that where they store food and then distribute it. Those have all been destroyed. And what's left is in Rafah. And so the people are forced out of there. We're looking at mass starvation, I think, happening pretty quickly. There was a study done. Again, this was by somebody at Kent College, so a fairly mainstream institution, believing that about 120,000 people would be dead by August.
Well, when you bring up the hospitals, I think that was the moment that I had tuned out, a little while ago when they were fleeing and babies were left behind in the hospital. And at that point, my wife was probably 9 months pregnant, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I just literally mentally cannot go down this rabbit hole, and just kind of turned off everything off at that moment.
Yeah. And just for the story you're referring to there, I think this was the Al Ali hospital where they forced, everybody to evacuate the hospital. They claimed it was being used as a Hamas base or something like that. So they force everyone out. Now, you can't just force everybody to leave a hospital on foot. If you're, a premature baby or something like that, without being in an incubator, you will die. And so the doctors say, well, we can't leave with the incubators, or we don't have the ability to like use those on the road. Like, what do we do with these children? And the Israelis said, leave them, we'll take care of them. Well, the second part of that never happened. And so not only did they leave them, they actually, the corpses ended up like rotting on the beds. Is absolutely horrific scenes. And this was something when it first happened, I thought to myself, there's no way this is true. Like, people all the time, even on my side of issues, put out propaganda, right? Uh, there's been people for years who have been predicting the Ukrainian military is 2 weeks away from absolutely collapsing. Like, obviously that hasn't happened. Like, people on my side of the issue get things wrong too. And I didn't report it, didn't talk about it on the show, didn't touch it. NBC News confirms it and they say, yeah, this actually did happen. And it's just one of those things that's so horrifying to know that this happened. And, largely with US tax dollars and other support that allows this to continue to go on.
Brutal. Absolutely fucking brutal.